Kasian's worked as a software engineer and product developer, specializing in pattern matching algorithms for companies such as Genentech, Sun Microsystems, Oracle, Motorola, Morningstar, and AstraZeneca. In 2001, he entered the bioinformatics industry, developing patented software that would detect hidden relationships between genes, drugs, and diseases. And this software was acquired by NEC in Japan. The Department of Energy's Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory Biosciences Division, led by Mina Bissell, invited Kasian to work on detecting hidden relationships between genes, drugs, and diseases related to extending human lifespan in the area of space biosciences, which led to several patents and work with the US Navy's Space and Naval Warfare Division. After publishing a paper with Michael I. Jordan, not the basketball player, grandfather of machine learning and teacher of Andrew Ng, deep learning specialist, he then founded a company called CQPod, a biomimetic, hope I pronounced that right, search and discovery company, which won the R&D 100 award for its technology. Franks then went on to repurpose the technology to detect hidden relationships between stocks and global events, using NLP and NLU as scientific and technical founder and CEO of Vectorspace AI. So that is company today. Today, Vectorspace AI operates in the financial markets and space biosciences with the Bissell Lab at Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory. Vectorspace AI has developed its own cryptocurrency that trades under the symbol VXV, a utility token that provides data provenance and secure access to data sets that generate alpha in the financial markets. So again, we're honored to have Kasian here today. And Kasian, it's all yours. Take it away. And thank you so much for doing this for us.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. And I'm glad that you mentioned active trader back in 1999. That brings back some memories. In particular, it brings back to me, I mean, the most outstanding trading vehicles were CMGI and ICGE back then. And these were incubators, and they'd conduct spin-offs. And it's really interesting in terms of the correlations that we see with trading vehicles today on the OTCBB and with cryptocurrency. And I think that the cryptocurrency markets have evolved enough so that we can start talking about them openly between the traditional market players and the new crypto players. Some of these new cryptocurrency traders, they've never traded a stock in their life. And it's very interesting to me because one person I noticed did not even know what the Dow was. So there's a lot of information arbitrage opportunity here. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but what I can do is explain what Vectorspace AI does. So if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt me at any time. So one thing that I noticed being in the markets, and that's not something that I talk about too often in the scientific field, that I spent a lot of time in the financial markets, but I actually had no choice because when I was about 12 years old, my mom gave me my first prospectus. It was Weyerhaeuser paper. And that was my homework assignment, basically, for me to read the prospectus of Weyerhaeuser paper. And I didn't know what I was reading, but my mom did that because she was in the financial markets. She was on the street. She worked for Montgomery Securities and Frank Dunleavy and Tom Weisel. So she would always come home. We were only allowed to watch the Nightly Business Report and Louis Rokeyser. We weren't allowed to watch anything else. And she would slap the Wall Street Journal down at the dinner table and start talking about the deal flow that happened on the street that she'd answer them. And then she'd say, well, that question I can't answer, or you're going to go to jail. So she was dealing with a lot of inside information. So we learned quite a bit about investment banking back then, and we learned quite a bit about the markets. And that helped in terms of understanding how to execute retail trades, order flow, books, all that stuff. And after a while, I decided to move away from moving money around in the markets. But before I did that, before I moved away from moving money around in markets, I noticed a couple of opportunities that I wanted to investigate. And they related to groups or baskets of stocks that would move based on a headline, or they'd move based on another stock. I don't know if you remember the Palm IPO. So you had Comms and you had Palm, and there was a huge arbitrage play. I think it was because Palm was IPOing and Comms was related. So when Palm, right before Palm was ready to list, Comms decided to Comms started to rise, right? And as soon as Palm went out, Comms dropped and Palm kept going up, and there was a lot of money to be made just based on that kind of arbitrage. But when you look at another kind of arbitrage, information arbitrage, it operates a little bit differently. I'll give you an example. In 2004, September, you guys remember this too. I know you do. In September 2004, Merck fell by 21% based on the Vioxx debacle. And if you wanted to find out what other stocks were related to Merck, what you would have to do is hire a couple of research analysts and spend the day and figure out who they were. And it just so happened that Pfizer was the most closely related stock according to some technology that we had built to analyze these relationships. And 8 weeks later, Pfizer drops by 14% because they have a similar drug in their pipeline related to COX-2 inhibitors and so forth. But even before that, there's a more impactful story. And this is based on a paper written by Gur Huberman out of Columbia University. It's based on a stock that we all know of called Entremed, ENMD. So Entremed in 1998, on a Friday after the close, issued news that said it had a cure for cancer after the close. So you can imagine what's going to happen on Monday, right? It was trading at $8, and on Monday it opened up at $88. So Gur Huberman wrote a paper about this. He said, "What's going on here?" You know, he's an academic from Columbia, and he decides to investigate this whole thing. And what he finds out, of course, is that, you know, with just a few hundred or a few thousand shares, Entremed was allowed to rise pre-market all the way up to about $80. So the question was, why is that? But more importantly, what Gur noted about the Entremed rise was that about a day or two later, there was a handful of stocks, or a basket of stocks, that also rose by 20 and 30%. And he wrote about this. So when I read his paper, I figured, you know what? Let's just code this up in software, see how far we get. And every time there's a global event, you know, a global event could be a purchase, you know, like Bristol Myers Squibb purchase of Celgene. That's a global event, you know, it affects global markets. So when you look at a global event, or when you look at a stock like Merck, or when you look at the stock like Bristol Myers Squibb purchasing Celgene, you can see that stocks related to Celgene, and I don't mean to jump around too much, but you guys can process this as quickly. So when you look at the way Bristol Myers Squibb purchased Celgene, and you look at the way Celgene rose by 31.8%, we formed a basket of stocks with our technology at Vectorspace related to Celgene that all had hidden relationships to Celgene, you know, and sure enough, we got great returns from that basket. So what we do at Vectorspace is we specialize in developing data sets that make predictions related to stocks and global events. So if there's a global event like an earthquake in Taiwan, you might want to know what stocks are related to it. You know, it would make sense. If you're in the markets, you're going to want to know if you have exposure, or if you want to take an opportunity, then you want to know if you can have a basket of stocks given to you based on earthquake in Taiwan. And you might want to short those, of course. But you might also want to understand that there are stocks related to an earthquake in Taiwan in the context of GPUs. So at any rate, what we do at Vectorspace AI is we produce data sets that enable you to create baskets, thematic baskets of stocks related to any global event. And we use natural language processing and natural language understanding to do that. And it's based on technology that we used at Lawrence Berkeley National Lab, and that we actually developed from the ground up along with JPL. So, we think we're pretty far ahead right now. And that's one of the reasons I moved away from the markets as a retail trader, was to execute on this opportunity related to data sets and purposing them for the financial markets, generating thematic baskets.
Tell us, Kasian, I think one of the things people want to know on this call is, can you talk about cryptocurrency? I had some questions I sent. I don't know if you saw them. Exactly what is cryptocurrency? Explain the exchange.
Sure.
How do you buy it? How do you sell it? How do
Sure.
you keep it? And how did you come about? I'm going to throw a lot of questions at you, but how did you come about developing VXE, and tell everyone about that? And how did that all come about? Because it's very
Sure.
unusual that someone develop their own crypto.
Yeah. Well, we kind of saw this coming when I had a friend tell me that we should invest in Bitcoin. I should buy some Bitcoin. That was back in 2013, and the guy that told me was one of the founding developers of Namecoin. And not many people know today that Namecoin was the second cryptocurrency. And when he began to explain to me what Bitcoin was doing and how it was being used and so forth, I figured, well, I'm not a currency trader. Currencies don't move enough for me, so I'll just see how this thing plays out. But what happened was something very interesting. And if you want to know what a cryptocurrency is, it relates directly to this. Bitcoin began trading not as a currency. It began trading like a stock or a debenture or a junk bond or a commodity. And that's when I began to realize, my goodness, there's something here. This thing is a trading vehicle. That's all that it is. It's a trading vehicle. And then when I witnessed Ethereum roll out, I figured, okay, you know what? We've got to get in this game. We've got to figure out how to access the capital, what is a truly global capital marketplace here. And I figured, let's just roll our own. And so initially, we forked Bitcoin. We had a fork of Bitcoin because we had Dylan Durst there, and he was the founding developer, one of the founding developers of Namecoin. And he was right there in my house, and we were forking Bitcoin. And we created a fork to do something interesting in the music industry called Songcoin. And if you look up Songcoin and Pomovi and Franks, you'll see that in 2014, we had a crypto called Song, S-O-N-G. But interestingly, back then it was really the wild. I mean, you think it's the worldwide Wild West today? In 2014, it was truly the worldwide Wild West, because what happened, we had someone steal our branding and roll their own fork of Bitcoin and then name it Song, ours. And they took all our thunder. We were being published, Billboard magazine had articles on us, and the International Business Times was writing about SeekPod, or writing about SeekPod, what we'd done before, but also Pomovi Songcoin. So anyway, when this happened, when we had our lead investor also leave because he was too scared of crypto, he went back to Australia. I figured, you know what? Let's go ahead and go back to the drawing board here, and we're going to batten down the hatches, and we're going to come out with our own crypto that is bulletproof in terms of its application, its utility, and no one's going to steal it this time. No one's going to steal our thunder this time. So we initially rolled out a token called Starmine, but then we had another investor realized that all of his transactions were being tracked, so he didn't want to do that anymore. So I figured, okay, this is really crazy here. I got the team together and I said, what we need to do is take everything that we have and put it under VXV. And what we'll do is we'll enable the world to access data sets with VXV. And we'll enable the world to engage in secure provenance with data sets, lineage, and I think that would be something that we could explore as a business model back then in terms of revenue as well, because we knew that we could charge 99 cents per minute for access to these data sets at the same time. And we'd have a crypto, VXV, as a true utility token with true global public market exposure as a trading vehicle. So that's where we are today, and that was the rationale. If you can get a guy that rolls an issue out on the OTCBB, there's no reason you can roll your own in the crypto space. All they are trading vehicles. They're not currencies. They do not trade like currencies. So they are trading vehicles that trade more like stocks than anything else.
I see. So therefore, this is interesting. So like if you have $100 bill, you go and you buy something with it. But with the crypto, not only can you purchase things, it's also can be traded, is what you're saying.
Yeah, it's like a stock that you can use to purchase things with.
Right. Now, when it's traded as a currency, what's backing it up though? Like with the American currency, you have gold. So how does that work?
Well, so like I said, it's not a currency. It's more like a stock.
Stock.
So this means that you have to think about it in terms of a stock, not a currency. That's the key. Most people don't understand that.
So if you own it, you should think at some point about selling it, in a sense, right?
Well, you should always think about taking half off the table, but that's up to you when and where you want to do it.
I have a question. I'm Beth. Nice to meet you. I'm dabbling in trading cryptocurrency. I'm a very, very technical day trader of stocks and options. And I'm curious if you feel like the same kind of technical analysis that I might use on stocks, which is basic price, volume, maybe some moving averages, is appropriate kind of technical analysis for trading crypto.
So my favorite indicator is the MACD. It's the 10-day MACD. And my other favorite indicator is the fib. So what I've noticed is that when you've got good volume, and well, first off, let me say that using technicals to trade crypto is a little bit different than using technicals or indicators to trade standard issues, right? When you look at the way crypto trades, it doesn't really follow a lot of what you might expect from other technical indicators, with the exception of the psychology of the market. So if everybody thinks it's going to go that way, then it's probably going to go that way. If everybody thinks you're going to get a 0.389 or 0.614 retrace, then it's probably going to happen. So because everybody's looking at it that way.
Yeah.
But there are indicators that kind of work. Overbought, oversold indicators. I've noticed those work. But when you look at the overall crypto markets, I think there are new indicators that need to be established for the crypto markets.
So how do you feel about things like bull flags and breakout kind of patterns that we might use in?
I think that those are valuable. I think there's a psychological component to them, but I also think they share in common something pretty interesting with the traditional markets, and that is look what Goldman Sachs does when we have a down market. When the trend is down, when we know we're going into a bear market in the traditionals, what happens with the TA departments? They shrink them, because the TA usually works pretty well in a good market, but it doesn't work pretty well in a bad market, So, you have to select your indicators very carefully on the downside. So I think that's what it shares in common, but I think there's a lot of value in a handful of indicators in the crypto markets, but most of it's psychology. It's psychological.
And another question is about markets like Coinbase and Binance, etc. How are you able to speak to like reputable markets or places that are, I don't know, more shady, let's say?
Yes, what we have noticed, in fact, are that most crypto exchanges out there are scams. Most of them exist to, engage in wash trading, bouncing trades back and forth, similar to, cashless options in the traditional markets. But when you look at exchanges, you have to be very careful, because a lot of exchanges are okay with introducing scam coins to be listed. And what they'll do with a company like ours is ask us if we want to be listed and expect, some kind of payment of $10,000. And they'll tell us that they have so much volume, but they really don't, because we can tell, They've got bots that they've built themselves running on, on their exchanges to fake their volume. So they look good. It looks like they're, generating billions and everything. That's not the case at all. There's only a handful of good exchanges out there internationally. We trade on Coin Metro, for example. Coinbase, an excellent exchange, obviously, right? You've got other kinds of exchanges like Kraken, another excellent exchange, especially because, these exchanges in the US are going to be abiding by US regulation. So they're pretty careful. But even still, what perplexes me is that even a company like Coinbase will still list scams. It's like, what are you guys doing?
Yeah.
XRP, give me a break,
Yeah. And what about potential tax, US tax implications of crypto trading?
Well, my advice is that I cannot give you advice on tax. I have to tell you that you have to get your own tax attorney. But what I can tell you is that according to Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, that operate outside the United States, mainly in the Netherlands, that's where they keep their money today. They used to keep it in the Bahamas. The reason they can do that is because they don't bring that cash directly into the United States. An individual can operate just like Amazon or Google in the Netherlands. And what that means is if you keep your exchange or if you keep the trading on an exchange outside the US, if you keep everything outside the US, you have a chance, according to the way things are structured with Apple, Amazon, and Facebook and Google, you have the same chance as they do to abide by US tax law with your crypto.
We have a question from Andy. You want to go ahead and answer?
Yeah. Do you have any feelings when you look at the better known cryptos, obviously Bitcoin, Ethereum, Doge, any feelings on whether one has a better chance of succeeding than another? Were there any features such as the how much can be mined versus how much existed? Any kind of thoughts on one crypto versus the other?
Yes, I have lots of thoughts on that. You have to stop me though. I might have too many. So one thought that pervades the minds here at Vectorspace AI, the most important feature is revenue. Return on invested capital too. ROIC. You want to be looking at a crypto that has its eye on revenue. Otherwise, you're using it as a trading vehicle. Trade the VIX and trade crypto at the same time. Trade Doge like you trade VIX or whatever. But are you going to put your family's money in the VIX? Long term. So, yeah, look for true companies that have their eye on revenue.
Can you explain, like with Bitcoin, why is there a finite number? I was reading, was it 15 million? There's some finite number.
Yeah, there's a finite number of 21 million coins.
Can you explain why that is and what, because a lot of people here have asked to understand how the mining works, and are they laptops, or what do these machines look like?
So what we're dealing with here is software. Just like Mark Andreessen said, software is eating the world. It's not something you can see or touch. And what this means is that in software, you can set a variable. And when you do a fork of Bitcoin, or if you look at the way Bitcoin is structured, there is a variable that you can set in what's called the creation of the Genesis block. And that variable will include a maximum supply. So max supply equals 21 million. Why is there a max supply? Well, obviously, we want control over the supply of any kind of currency, according to Satoshi Nakamoto. And the way he structured Bitcoin, you do not want any kind of inflationary currency. You want a deflationary currency. So that was the objective there, was to make sure that you weren't having an increase in coins, you were having a decrease, and that would benefit the whole ecosystem of miners and so forth. And the complexity of that, I don't think we should get into now, But I can tell you the benefit here, the analog, in the US public markets, when you have a traditional company, you've got your authorized shares. Your authorized shares, if you have a US publicly traded company, your authorized shares are different than your shares outstanding, and your shares outstanding are different than the float, right? Now, interestingly, in the United States, if you run a publicly traded company, you can tell the SEC, well, I've got 300 million authorized shares, that's what I need, and I'd like to issue 50 million outstanding, and we'll see how much winds up in the float. And when you have a bad company, when you have a company that is below board, that company will use that whole structure as an ATM, meaning that they can call the SEC anytime and ask for additional authorized shares so that they can keep moving, they can keep increasing the number of shares indefinitely. Now, that can't happen in crypto. That's kind of why I like it too.
Huh. Do we have other?
I have a question, if I may. This is Mike. I get from the nature of your company, you do this by deep AI. Would the retail trader have a chance in this? I would think most of what you're doing comes in the most of the changes in the market come in from the black swan type events rather than from supply and demand. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, first off, I'd say that markets don't move based on supply and demand. They move based on perceived supply and perceived demand. And secondarily, black swan events, we're all about black swan events. My goodness, we've been living through black swan events since LTCM, since the dot-com implosion, and more reason we can go on and on, right? And then we've had the coronavirus, right? As when we called it the coronavirus back then. That was our latest, not really a black swan event because, or maybe it was. It did something, to the markets that no one ever would have expected, right? But what we did was we created a thematic basket of stocks related to the coronavirus, and boy, did they perform. Invax was in there, by the way. But when you look at a black swan event, you're right. You want to be trading basically any major global events. Black swan events, you can trade those. You can trade a black swan event as well. You might be a little late, but you can certainly develop a basket of stocks related to the coronavirus, or maybe even a white swan event like GameStop.
Huh.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and we'll certainly be offering thematic baskets to retail. I used to be a retail trader myself, and I think that, enabling access to thematic baskets for retail traders, I think that's important. Right now, we work directly with hedge funds and asset management companies, and, we're kind of leaning more toward retail because of what has happened unexpectedly in retail. So we didn't expect retail to do what it did, but it's here to stay, and we're going to address it.
Well, are you thinking of the retail trading like an ETF, or are you thinking of the retail trading like a newsletter, or how are you going to do that?
Well, when you look at a global event, we would like a retail trader to be able to insert that global event into a search box, and out comes a basket of stocks that you can go long or short on.
Wow. Wow. Can you explain how you make that happen in just a general term without giving away any trade secrets? Or?
Sure. So we're a natural language processing, natural language understanding company. And that means we analyze human language surrounding public companies. So every public company has a rich public company profile associated to it. And you guys have been reading those for years, right? So whether or not you use Yahoo Finance to go to their profile section, or whether you use Reuters or whatever it is, you're going to go and you're going to look at the public company profile, and then you're going to look at other public company profiles and determine that there's a connection or even a hidden relationship. look at what Bib did, So, I'm sure that people were looking at Bib's company profile, Biogen, and they figured, okay, so this is what Biogen does. Let me look at a few other stocks that might be related. You look at their company profile, and sure enough, you might find something because your brain can process human language. So what we try to do is mimic that process right there, how a market researcher might connect stocks to a global event or another event of any kind.
I should add from my perspective, Kasian, this is actually for everyone on the call. By the way, we have 50 people now on the call, so that's terrific. I should mention that from my perspective, this is actually significant because since at least 1999, when I go into Yahoo Finance or some of these stocks, when you're some of these services, when you look at a given stock that you're interested in and you're purchasing, it'll sometimes have a list of other stocks and it say these stocks are related. And if you know, like IT, like I do, you know that some of the companies they list have absolutely nothing to do.
I know.
Yeah. So what you're doing
yeah.
is really value added. That's my point.
Yeah, I mean, we try to cut through the noise and we try to make sure that the basket of stocks that we give you related to a global event are truly related based on hidden relationships.
Does anyone else have any questions? We've got 50 people. There must be more questions on anything Kasian's talked about or cryptocurrency or. No one? I noticed, Lorraine, you're on. Are you there? You have a question? No? How about Rob? Do you have any questions?
I don't know where to start. I mean, it's just, it's so above my comprehension level.
If I may ask another question, I feel like I have a intermediate comprehension of blockchain, not an expert level, but a lot of people come to me and ask about it. Do you have a simplified way that you like to explain blockchain to people, what it is, what the application is?
Well, no, I don't, because it depends on the audience that you're talking to. It's very hard to come up with a general description of blockchain for the world because it's so complex. So, for example, with a software engineer or with someone who's familiar with technology, I would say, oh, this is easy. It's like a revision control system. You're doing hashes of hashes. No big deal. But to, my daughter, I would say, well, this is a way to take data, put it in one place, change it, and then put it in another place, change it again, so that no one else can change it like that ever again, just like you did. So, I mean, you can go with really simplified explanations, or you can go with, complex explanations, depending on the audience you're talking to. If I'm talking to an investor, the investor usually has some idea of blockchain, and the way for me to explain blockchain is based on security, and based on what's called immutability. And that means whatever you do, no one else can change that. It's yours. Okay? That's blockchain.
Thanks.
I've got a question. When Bitcoin first started, there was in the news, there were reports of, different coffee houses taking Bitcoin to buy coffee with and so forth. And there was anticipation that a lot more retailers would start taking Bitcoin. And now recently I've heard, Bitcoin is up to, I don't know, $34,000 or something like that for one Bitcoin. How do I buy a cup of coffee with something that's worth $34,000?
That is a good question. So you hit on a very important point, which is that most of the world right now still thinks that you have to buy one Bitcoin. You don't. They're fractionalized. So if you look at the reason that stocks have been fractionalized recently, stocks were never fractionalized. The reason stocks have become fractionalized, where you can buy a fraction of anything you want these days, almost anything you want, is because they were mimicking what a crypto can do. So when you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is just one of many cryptos. When you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin is fractionalized with 18 decimal places. That means you can take one Bitcoin and chop it up. You can chop up a Bitcoin and down all the way down to what's called a unit of a Satoshi. So you can take just a small fraction of a Bitcoin and purchase something with it.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions or?
Are you usually using very short intervals in trading, or do you try to very short intervals, or you try and use very long intervals, or how do you determine your interval?
So we can talk about how we determine our intervals just to a certain extent without going into any proprietary aspects of it. And let me tell you one thing, the reason I like the 10-day MACD, it's one of my favorite intervals, 10 days. If you look at swing trading, you're looking at holding something between, 3 and 5 days usually. So when you look at trading thematic baskets, we've found, based on statistics, based on running our own back tests, modeling, that holding something for about 3 days, 3 to 4 days, that's about right. When you look at the way a Momo play is designed, after about 3 days, momentum is lost. These days, it's a different story because everybody and their grandma is trading, but so you might have momentum that carries all the way through, for a few weeks or so. But in general, it really should be up to your personal model. If you're a swing trader, then you should understand that, you're probably going to make a lot of money between 3 and 5 days, just like trading an individual stock.
Can you talk more about your data sets, natural language programming, natural language understanding, etc.?
Sure. So we build data sets that help correlate a stock to a global event. So for example, if you have, let's say you've got, we can go back to the what happened with Biogen. When you look at Biogen, what we do is we have a data set, which is rows and columns. So one thing that most people don't understand is that data is different than a data set. Data is unstructured. So if you look at that company profile, we take that, we create calculations around it. You've probably heard of GPT-3, which is OpenAI's language modeler. And I know you've probably heard of BERT, B-E-R-T. BERT runs most of Google services today. That's a language modeler. That means they produce correlations between words and other words. And the correlations that we produce are between stocks and other stocks, or stocks and words, stocks and drug compounds, or stocks and global events, or stocks and or chocolate chip cookies if you want, ingredients to chocolate. We can correlate anything to anything. But when you look at the way a data set is structured with rows and columns, we use language. We pick apart language. We create distance calculations between words. We add those up. We go ahead and store those. And then we make additional calculations so that at the end of the day, we've got what's called a matrix, which is basically like an Excel file, rows and columns. And now you can see that you can correlate. If your rows were pharmaceutical companies and your columns were pharmaceutical companies, you can now see that you could take an individual stock from the row and then trace it all the way to a column and then understand how well that scores to that particular stock on that column. So we create language models by analyzing text, human language, creating distance calculations between words, and then we do a lot of other transformations. It's one of the most complex things you can do in AI. It's actually the tip of the spear in AI. Natural language processing and natural language understanding, because you're trying to mimic the way a human might understand another human in terms of symbols and language. So that's kind of what we do. It's pretty complicated, but we do it pretty well. I'm pretty comfortable with the way we do it.
You know, it reminds me a little bit of SPSS, statistical.
Right. Yeah.
Because you can have strength of relationships. So for example, to put it in practical terms for everyone, most people don't know this, but DEER, I'm sure you've all heard of DEERE, which works with all the farmers in the country with agricultural equipment. They actually have a wind division. So if you were doing what you said, you could code for that they have are in wind, but it's not necessarily a major wind player. So there'd be a weak relationship, but still a relationship with the wind.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Can you explain how Vectorspace intends to create revenue?
Yes, and that is the question of the day, and we have the answer of the day. So revenue is something that we've been targeting since day one, and a path to revenue is a long path when you look at a traditional Silicon Valley startup. When you look at a cryptocurrency, it's a tough path to revenue. One of the reasons for that is most cryptos don't focus on revenue. Our focus on revenue includes selling data sets to hedge funds, asset management companies, or any institution that would be interested in paying 99 cents per data set per update. So if, for example, you're an asset management company and you'd like a data set with pharmaceuticals for the columns and drug compounds for the rows, then you're probably going to want an update to that data set because you don't want to be working with old data. Otherwise, your competitor will get ahead of your trade. So providing updates to data sets and at 99 cents per minute, that's the base level target for us in terms of revenue generation. So we're targeting customers that are interested in making money because we've proven with back tests, and back test, you can't rely on a back test fully, but we have proven that we can generate revenue. If you are a fund or institution of any kind, you can generate revenue with our data sets. So if our customers can generate revenue with data sets, we know that we can.
I've got one more question. One of the things I always tell new traders is that they shouldn't be using real money at first. They should be doing simulated trading, paper trading, virtual trading, until they know what they're doing and they have a proven record of success. I went to the website here for Coin Metro and looked to see if they were advertising a simulated trading platform. I didn't see it. Do you know if they have one?
I don't think that they do, but we can go ahead and ask them if you'd like us to.
Yeah.
That's a good question, and it's a very prescient question because eventually a lot of crypto exchanges are going to need to offer a lot of trading platforms. Crypto trading platforms are going to need to partner with the exchanges on that synthetic trading basis. The crypto markets just haven't matured to that level yet.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Can you explain how your product is superior to any other competitive or similar product?
Yes, that's very easy. There is no other similar competitive product.
Excellent.
I have a comment and a sort of a question. I've been working on with a group of people in Washington, D.C., with all these products trying to fight the virus worldwide. We have like 25 companies now throughout the world. And one company that came along is working on developing, they're taking swamp water and running it through their process and coming up with molecules, unique molecules, and then creating a library. Now, I don't know how they actually store the data, but I'm trying to connect this with what you do. Have you looked at that at all, working with companies? I think the Gates Foundation also is doing that, where they have thousands of molecules and possibly tying it, back to your original the bio you presented, tying it to various drugs or diseases or possibilities of use in the form of your data sets?
Well, first off, let me say that there's always been a huge effort, at least since data has been around related to molecules, numerical data and data that you can generate based on screening of molecules and things like that, synthetic molecule generation and comparing molecules with one another, see how well they fit based on their MOA. But what you find today is that using natural language understanding, natural language processing, this is just now being used by a few companies to understand the context of molecules, language surrounding molecules, and not just human language surrounding molecules, but other attributes surrounding molecules, so that you can then create a match between a group of attributes related to this molecule and a group of attributes related to this drug compound. You know, if they have similar attributes, then there might be something there. If they have similar attributes in the context of chocolate chip cookies, there might be something there. If they have similar attributes in the context of a disease, there might be something there, and a researcher might want to investigate it. So it's very early days in developing data sets that are utilizing natural language processing. We'd like to be able to do that. The closest that we're getting is correlating drug compounds to micronutrients and correlating diseases to drug compounds, for example, or correlating diseases to phytochemicals. So when you look at what's happening in nutrigenomics, I think that's going to be an area that a lot of people are going to be looking at in the future, because it does certainly connect to precision medicine. And that, of course, connects to protecting the human body here on Earth and in space.
Can you tell us a little more about your foray into space biosciences, what you did at LBNL, and how you're going to translate that into this new endeavor?
Sure. So we got our start in space biosciences after we moved away from bioinformatics in 2002. And in 2002, Lawrence Berkeley National Lab invited us to work on establishing relationships between genes, drugs, and diseases that extended human lifespan. And one of the reasons for that is extending lifespan directly connects to space biosciences. In order to travel to space and protect the body, you have to protect and repair human DNA. And you have to understand what kinds of micronutrients, what kind of drug compounds, what kinds of environmental factors, in particular, what's called the tumor microenvironment, the TME, and the extracellular matrix, and exosomes, and things like these, how they impact the health of your body. When you look at space biosciences, the reason that Berkeley Lab decided to have us look at these relationships and establish technology and algorithms to find hidden relationships between genes that extended human lifespan was because that all had to do with DNA repair. So the better your DNA repairs itself, the better you're able to protect yourself in space without causing cancer. You don't want to be repairing DNA all the time, otherwise you're going to have cancer. So protecting and repairing human DNA in space, and along with tissue regeneration without causing cancer, is the goal. And in order to do that, you have to understand what genes are involved. You have to understand what environmental factors involved, what kind of epigenomic factors are involved, all the OMICS, basically. You're looking at every omic that you could possibly think of, microbiomic, everything. When you look at your genomes, the genomes in your body are extremely complex, and that means that you can affect them in different ways. If you can affect the human body in terms of repairing DNA, then you're on the right path. And the reason for that is when you're in space, you have what are called HZE particles. These are heavy ion particles that travel through space, and about once a week, an astronaut might get hit with one of these particles, and that particle will cause what's called a DSB, a double-strand break in your DNA. And a double-strand break is a lot harder to repair than a single-strand break. We have single-strand breaks happen all the time, every day, here on Earth. and they're called single nucleotide polymorphisms, SNPs. And our body has the ability to repair our DNA. But repairing double-strand breaks is a lot harder. And when they happen in space, they happen more often. So in order to repair a double-strand break in your DNA, you're going to need some very fancy tooling and biological tooling. And that means a combination of things, a combination of micronutrients, nutrigenomics, which connects directly to that, a combination of epigenomic factors, which means that you're studying how the outside environment impacts the expression of your genes and the repair mechanisms of your genes. And you're also going to have to understand drug compounds. So you're looking at a cocktail here, a cocktail of nutrients, drug compounds, and environmental factors that all help to repair your DNA quickly. Because if your DNA in space is not repaired enough, we're going to have some problems, in space. And that's why space biosciences is the key here. When you look at Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos is flying up on the 20th of July. We've got Richard Branson flying up July 4th, I think it is. And then you've got Elon Musk, he hasn't flown up yet, but who knows if he will, but he has other guys flying up all the time. And eventually, Virgin Galactic wants to build a space hotel. We're going to be establishing a moon base. This is where we're going. We're going to Mars. This is where the human race is going. This means there's going to be a lot of humans in space. This means we have to work to protect the human body in space. This is the most important thing that humanity is doing right now, is understanding how to protect and repair human DNA in space. And so with the help of Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and Mina Bissell and Eleanor Blakely, these are top researchers in the field of space biosciences. They in fact advise NASA space biosciences. So they sit on our advisory board, and you'll probably hear about that in a couple of days. And our objective is, of course, to establish the world's best space biosciences company and the most qualified space biosciences company, so that we can protect and repair human DNA in space. So anytime SpaceX or Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin need any advice on protecting the human body in space, we'll go ahead and have Mina Bissell and Lawrence Berkeley Lab provide advice through our advisory board. And we'll be able to do that pretty quickly here. I'm not saying that we're going to have 1,000 people in space by the end of the year, but the fact is that this is happening now, and there's no stopping it. So the most important work is happening right here in our company.